The room was already thick with tension when Meghan McCain took the stage. It wasn't a rally, it wasn't a memorial. It was a slick, corporate youth leadership summit in New York City, sponsored by the very institutions Charlie Kirk had warned about. With polished lighting, camera-ready panels, and approved sound bites, the event had one unspoken goal: reshape the narrative, erase Charlie, replace him. Meghan, poised with media-savvy confidence and armed with her usual establishment-honed talking points, stepped up to the microphone with a practiced media smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Let's be honest," she began. "This country needs healing, not the kind of division peddled by voices like Charlie Kirk's." A few claps came from the front row. The rest of the room froze. Jonathan Roumie, the American actor, was seated 2 rows back. He had kept silent until then. He hadn't come to fight. He hadn't even planned to speak. But watching Charlie's name drag through polished teeth, that flipped the switch. Jonathan Roumie, the actor, stood slowly. The spotlight wasn't on him, but every camera turned as if it were. His unexpected presence, an actor stepping out of the shadows, cut through the synthetic atmosphere of the summit like a blade. No stage manager had prepped for this. No security guard moved yet. "Division," he said loud and clear. Charlie didn't divide this country. He exposed the people who did, and most of them were smiling on CNN while cities burned. Meghan blinked. The smile vanished. Jonathan stepped forward. No mic, no cue, just raw truth. "Charlie fought for forgotten Americans while you leveraged your famous last name for a media platform. He stood up when it was dangerous. You posted Instagram quotes when it was convenient." Gasps, someone whispered. "Is that him?" Meghan tried to interrupt, but Jonathan raised his voice. "Don't pretend to mourn someone you smeared." The room was no longer watching a summit. It was witnessing a reckoning, and Jonathan Roumie was just getting started. Security hovered near the edges of the room now, unsure whether to step in or stand down. The moderator, some overpaid network personality with a frozen grin, mumbled into her earpiece, clearly begging for direction. But the audience, silent, locked in. No one was scrolling, no one was clapping. They were just staring at Jonathan Roumie. Meghan took a careful breath, visibly rattled. She placed a hand on the podium, trying to steady her voice. "I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to inspire solutions." "You're here to whitewash," Jonathan cut in, still standing. "You and your handlers think if you speak soft enough, no one will notice whose blood is on the floor." A few people gasped. Someone clapped. It only took one. Jonathan took a step forward. "You call Charlie divisive because he wouldn't play nice with the elite, because he challenged the media machine that propelled your career, buffered your critiques, and put your family's brand above honest commentary." Meghan's lips pressed into a tight line. Jonathan didn't stop. "Charlie walked through college campuses where your friends called him a fascist. He still showed up. He still debated. He still prayed for them. And you hid behind PR teams and press releases while pretending you were just a mom when it suited you." The moderator finally tried to intervene. "Mr. Roumie, this isn't a stage for liars," Jonathan snapped, eyes never leaving Meghan. "This is about truth. And the truth is, Charlie died fighting for something you'll never understand because you were born thinking the truth was whatever your team told you to say." The audience broke. Some stood, some clapped, some sat frozen. But Meghan, she reached for her water bottle with a shaky hand. And that was when Jonathan delivered the line that would go viral within the hour. "You sound just like the political establishment that shaped your career, Meghan." Full of carefully crafted words, short on genuine conviction, and a coward when truth is uncomfortable. And the room went silent. Meghan's face flushed, whether from embarrassment, rage, or the sudden realization that she had lost control of the room. No one could say, but it didn't matter. The illusion of power, of poise, shattered in an instant. Her smile, the polished, practiced media smile, vanished. Jonathan didn't sit down. He didn't back away. He didn't even blink. "You think this is about a headline?" he said, turning slightly to address the crowd. "About owning the moment. But it's not. This is about a young man who gave everything, who stood where others were silent, who prayed when others mocked, and who died while fighting for a country you and your family turned into a playground." Meghan's mouth opened to speak, but nothing came out. "Charlie wasn't perfect," Jonathan continued, "but he was brave. He spoke with conviction. And not once did he use a tragedy to boost his brand." That hit hard. A few reporters at the back of the room lowered their phones. The whispering began. Live stream comments exploded online. Viewers across the country were screen recording everything. Meghan finally found her voice, though it cracked when she spoke. "That's unfair." And Jonathan raised a hand. "What's unfair is watching you people dance on his grave." Gasps echoed. "You had nothing to say when Charlie was alive, but now that he's gone, you suddenly have moral wisdom to share. Spare us." The moderator motioned for a break, desperate to regain control. But Jonathan leaned over the podium and delivered the final blow for the segment. "Your political sphere sold influence, silenced enemies, and called it commentary. Charlie spoke the truth and got called a terrorist. If that doesn't break your heart, then you never had one." The silence that followed was suffocating. Meghan looked down. Jonathan looked up and America watched. The moderator's attempt to regain order failed before it even began. The room was locked in place. Every eye tracking Jonathan, every camera lens refocusing, every live stream viewer texting the same thing. He just destroyed Meghan McCain. Jonathan didn't slow down. He turned his body fully toward the audience now, shoulders squared, voice low but resolute. "You call people like Charlie a threat because he reminded this country what conviction looks like, because he stood in a storm you helped create and didn't flinch." His voice deepened. The McCains and their allies turned politics into a brand. Charlie turned heartbreak into purpose. Meghan tried to interrupt. "You're spinning this." "No," Jonathan shot back, eyes like steel. "You're spinning, Meghan. Spinning in circles to distract from the fact that a young conservative with a Bible and a backbone scared you. And now that he's gone, you feel safe enough to mock him from your stage." Gasps again. Some in the audience even clapped nervously at first, then stronger. Jonathan reached into his bag and pulled out a worn, folded American flag. It was Charlie Kirk's. He held it up with both hands. This was his. It sat on his desk every day. It wasn't a photo op. It wasn't a backdrop. It was a promise, one he lived by until the day he died. Then he faced Meghan again. "You call that a threat?" Jonathan walked over and laid the flag gently on the moderator's desk, not even sparing a glance toward McCain. "That flag deserves more honor than your entire panel combined." Meghan clenched her jaw, gripping the sides of the table. "You came here to posture," Jonathan said, turning one last time to his opponent. "But I came here with truth, and truth doesn't need a famous last name." The moderator called for an unscheduled break, but the internet, it didn't take one. Clips flooded X and Instagram with one caption: "Jonathan just buried the McCain legacy with a flag." The cameras were rolling, but even they couldn't catch the full scope of what had just happened. The auditorium was electric. Phones were lifted high, recording from every angle. Some were still clapping, some were still stunned, and Meghan McCain, she sat motionless, not defeated, not humiliated, worse, exposed. Jonathan didn't return to his seat. He stood at the edge of the stage, arms crossed, the flag still displayed like a silent witness to everything said. The moderator shuffled papers, fumbled for words, trying to stitch the conversation back together. But the damage had been done, and it was irreversible. Meghan finally leaned forward, her voice lower, colder. "You really think a flag makes you right?" Jonathan turned sharp and precise. "No, but it reminds me who I'm fighting for, which is more than I can say for you." Meghan scoffed. "You're a mouthpiece, a puppet." Jonathan smiled. It wasn't a soft smile. It was the kind that comes after you've already won. "A puppet doesn't speak truth to your face." The moderator jumped in. "Ladies, if we could—" Jonathan ignored him. His voice cut through the noise. "You can hide behind your political name, your father's speeches, his scandals, his politics, but you don't get to hide behind his enemies. Charlie Kirk was never yours to belittle." Meghan fired back. "He radicalized young people. He spread division." "No," Jonathan snapped. "He awakened them. He gave them courage to stand when people like you demanded silence. You call that radical? Then I'm proud to be radical." The room erupted. Not just applause, cheers from students, from faculty, from guests who hadn't clapped in decades. Jonathan took a step forward. "You don't get to rewrite history, Meghan. Not when we were there, not when we watched him fight, and not while I'm still breathing." Meghan's smirk faded, slowly, unevenly. The cracks were showing. Jonathan looked at the audience one last time. "You want to honor Charlie Kirk? Then stop letting people like this define what a patriot looks like." And just like that, he turned his back on Meghan and walked straight into the crowd. Phones went up again. #Jonathan Roumie, #Charlie Legacy, #Roumie Vise McCain, #Truth Over Dynasty. Jonathan didn't need a security escort. The students cleared the way for him like he was royalty. Some nodded, others whispered, "Thank you." One girl in the front row clutched a small Bible and mouthed, "For Charlie." Jonathan saw it, and he nodded back just once like a soldier honoring another. Meghan remained seated on the stage, lips pressed tight, hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles widened. Her team at the side of the stage motioned to cut the stream to end the panel, but the damage was already trending. A reporter in the third row spoke into his mic. "Jonathan Roumie just dismantled the McCain legacy in less than 5 minutes." The comment went viral before Meghan could even stand. Backstage, Jonathan was offered a chair, but he waved it off. He stood by a monitor, arms crossed, watching the replays of his own confrontation. But his eyes weren't on himself. They were locked on one image. Meghan, stunned, blinking, searching for a response. A producer whispered, "Do you want to release a follow-up statement?" Jonathan didn't even blink. "I just did." Meanwhile, on Meghan's side, the panic was controlled chaos. One aide was on the phone with PR, another with the McCain Institute's media team. They were trying to find a headline, a quote, anything to spin it. But there was no spin. "He called me a coward," Meghan whispered. "No," said her assistant, trying to salvage the moment. "He implied it." Meghan's eyes narrowed. "No," she said it in front of cameras. In front of students, he weaponized his death. But what she didn't admit, what none of them did, was that it wasn't just Jonathan's words that hurt. It was that he said what millions were already thinking. And worse, he said it while holding a flag. Outside, students were still gathered. Some held up signs. Others just stood in silence. And one bold freshman stood on a bench and shouted. He stood up. Meghan sat down. Another joined. "Jonathan, for the people." Charlie would have clapped. And just like that, the chant began. "Truth has no last name. Truth has no last name." It echoed through the quad like thunder. By evening, the confrontation had overtaken every platform. Hashtags like #RoumieCrush McCain and #CharlieWoodClap trended across X, Instagram, and TikTok. Clips from the panel racked up millions of views. The soundbite of Jonathan's final words, full of carefully crafted words, short on genuine conviction, and a coward when truth is uncomfortable, became a rallying cry. But while the media storm exploded, Jonathan was quiet. He had flown to New York alone and visited the church Charlie had once spoken at in Manhattan. No press, no cameras, just him, a folded flag, and a pew near the back. He didn't speak, not even when the pastor recognized him. He just sat, placed the flag on his lap, and stared forward. He didn't need applause. He didn't come for the optics. He came because he knew Meghan never would. Back in Washington, however, Meghan's office scrambled. They tried drafting a counterstatement, something polished, something presidential, but every version fell flat. Every draft was met with silence or worse, laughter from younger staffers watching the viral clip on loop. "Maybe you shouldn't have mocked the kid who died," one intern whispered too loudly. Meghan turned. "What did you say?" The room went still, but no one repeated it. The air was shifting, even within her walls. Her family's legacy no longer shielded her, and Jonathan had pierced something deeper than pride. He'd drawn blood from the illusion that the old name still held moral ground. And he didn't do it with power. He did it with truth. On a conservative podcast that night, the host replayed the moment for the 5th time and said, "Jonathan Roumie didn't just destroy a McCain, he tore the mask off their whole game. And he did it without shouting until the last second. That was for Charlie." The clip was shared by grieving students, veterans, young conservatives, and shockingly independents who had never even heard of Charlie Kirk. Jonathan hadn't just confronted a McCain. He had turned Charlie's death into a mirror and forced the elite to look. The next morning, Jonathan stood outside the Capitol building with no press conference scheduled, no podium, just a black coat, the same folded flag, and a thin Bible in his hands, the one Charlie's mother had given him after the funeral. A small group of reporters spotted him from the steps and moved in cautiously. Cameras were ready, microphones were extended, but Jonathan didn't address them immediately. Instead, he walked silently to the stone edge of the plaza, placed the flag on the concrete, and opened the Bible to Romans. He didn't read it aloud. He just let it sit there, open in the wind, and then he turned. "Let me be clear," he said, his voice low but firm. "This isn't about politics. This isn't about power. This is about a man who stood when others folded, and a legacy that should have been honored, not mocked by someone clinging to her last name like it's a shield." A reporter asked, "Do you mean Meghan McCain?" Jonathan didn't blink. "She knows exactly who I mean. She wore her political lineage like a mask, But when it slipped, all we saw was the same contempt for everyday Americans that permeates the establishment. He didn't shout, he didn't flinch. But the line that came next, people would quote it for weeks. "You sound just like the political establishment that shaped your career, Meghan," full of carefully crafted words, short on authentic conviction, and a coward when real truth is inconvenient. The difference, at least your predecessors knew when to step back. That clip hit every social platform within the hour. Even left-wing accounts had to admit it wasn't performative. It was precise, and it stung. Across the country, viewers began drawing their own conclusions. Memes popped up showing Meghan's parents behind a velvet curtain, while Jonathan stood alone, flag in hand. Others posted side-by-side shots. One of Meghan at a gala with donors, one of Jonathan at Charlie's grave, kneeling in silence. He doesn't need the machine. One post read, "He's got the truth and we know it when we hear it." Meanwhile, Meghan's team tried a new strategy. Silence, no tweets, no statements, just disappearance. But that too spoke volumes. The more she hid, the more Jonathan's words echoed. Not just online, but in living rooms, college campuses, churches, in VFW halls. An Iraq veteran posted a 30-second video from his truck. "I didn't always agree with Charlie Kirk, but he fought. He believed. And the day a McCain laughs at a man like that dying, you better believe we'll remember who stood up and who stayed silent." Jonathan didn't just defend him, he defended us. It had gone beyond partisanship. Jonathan wasn't just a spokesperson anymore. He was becoming a reckoning. Later that evening, Meghan McCain finally re-emerged, not through a press conference or formal interview, but via a carefully worded Instagram story. A beige background, white serif text, nothing face-to-face, nothing personal. Just a line that read, "It's a shame to see grief weaponized by those seeking attention." The post vanished within 24 hours, but screenshots didn't. Within minutes, Jonathan's supporters and even neutral commentators exploded across social media. "Weaponized?" they asked. The only weapon was the smirk you wore when a patriot died. And Jonathan didn't wait this time. He took to X, formerly Twitter, that night, quote, tweeting the image with a picture of Charlie's casket draped in an American flag. No caption, no hashtags, just a single word, shameful. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Meghan hid behind curated statements in ambient tones. Jonathan showed the coffin. It sent a chill. The next morning, an unexpected invitation hit Jonathan's inbox, a request from a bipartisan group of veterans to speak at their national summit in Arizona. The topic, courage in a coward's world. He didn't hesitate. He flew out that evening. When Jonathan stepped onto the stage the next day, there was no teleprompter, just rows of chairs filled with veterans, some in wheelchairs, some standing at attention. No political flags, just American one. He opened simply, "I'm not here as a politician. I'm here because a friend of mine believed that silence in the face of dishonor is complicity." Applause. He paused, then looked straight ahead. Charlie Kirk didn't die a perfect man. He died a bold one. And some people, especially those who grew up in houses of power, will never understand what it means to bleed for a cause bigger than your last name. Gasps. One man in the front row stood and saluted. And then came the line that broke through cable news and landed on every platform. "You want to call him a threat? Then be honest. He threatened your control. And when that control slipped, you laughed at a coffin. That's not grief, that's cowardice wrapped in pearls." The room exploded. And outside, anchors scrambled. Mainstream pundits didn't know what to do. They couldn't ignore the clip. It had already hit 4 million views in under 6 hours. Even late-night hosts, usually quick to mock, avoided the story altogether. But Meghan, she posted a picture of her dog the next day. No one cared. Jonathan, meanwhile, had been invited to speak at Liberty University, Turning Point, Hillsdale. Even a few local Democrat town halls, people who wanted to hear what the fuss was about. He wasn't just rising, he was becoming inevitable. 2 weeks later, Meghan McCain stood before a select panel of political donors in a Manhattan townhouse, her voice tight, her posture rehearsed. She was trying to regain footing after the storm Jonathan had unleashed. But no matter what she said, the shadow of Charlie's casket and Jonathan's words hung heavy in the air. "I think we should all be cautious about elevating voices that stir division," Meghan said, her tone clipped. "Especially those who..." The moderator cut in. "You mean Jonathan Roumie?" A nervous chuckle spread through the room, but Meghan didn't laugh. She just blinked. "Yes." Outside the event, reporters waited, but none of the stories they were chasing were about Meghan anymore. They were chasing Jonathan. That same night, Jonathan appeared on stage at Hillsdale College. The crowd erupted the moment he stepped up. Not just students, but veterans, small business owners, moms, truckers, young men in worn ball caps, older women in Sunday dresses, all of them there because they'd felt something in his voice that no one else was daring to say out loud anymore. He held Charlie's Bible in his hands, the same one he'd once taken to debates, the same one Ilhan had mocked. He raised it gently and said, "This isn't a prop. It's a promise. It's what Charlie lived by. It's why he refused to stay silent. And it's what too many people in this country, especially those born into power, are terrified of." Cheers erupted, but then he lowered his voice. "This moment right here, it isn't about Charlie anymore. It's about all of you. It's about whether you'll speak when it's unpopular or stay quiet and safe while they laugh at your values." And then he said it, the line that would be quoted for years. "If defending a patriot makes me dangerous, then I'll wear that threat like a badge. But if mocking a man's death makes you elite, then your legacy is built on a coffin." The room went still, no chant, no noise, just reverence because everyone knew exactly who that was aimed at. Meghan, Ilhan, Obama, the whole hollow chorus who used polished language and camera angles to mock what real sacrifice looked like. Back in New York, producers at MSNBC cut to commercial. Even CNN flinched. They couldn't spin it. They couldn't bury it. Jonathan wasn't trying to be accepted anymore. He was leading. And as he walked off stage that night, Charlie's Bible still in hand, someone in the crowd stood and whispered. He didn't just speak for him, he spoke for all of us. In a world where silence buys comfort and cowardice wears pearls, Jonathan Roumie chose fire. He didn't just defend a name, he defended truth, legacy, and the right to mourn without mockery. They mocked Charlie's death to win applause. He carried his Bible to wake a nation. And when Meghan tried to weaponize grief, Jonathan turned it into a sword and cut through every lie with one line. "You sound just like the political establishment that shaped your career, Meghan." Full of carefully crafted words, short on genuine conviction, and a coward when truth is uncomfortable. America heard him, and this time they said no network could silence the echo. This wasn't politics, this was justice. And it wasn't just Charlie's memory he honored. It was every American who's tired of watching the elite mock what they'll never understand. And if this moment moved you, if you felt the weight of truth cutting through the noise, then don't let it end here. There are more stories to uncover, more masks to pull back, and more voices that refuse to be silenced. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next reckoning.